Please be seated. Welcome, everyone, to the 203rd convening of the academic year at Amherst College. Convocation marks a particular place in time, and it also situates us in a particular place here in this chapel and in this region. And so I invite you to think with me as we begin about where we are. I'd like to acknowledge that we gather today on the Nonotuck homeland of the Kinnetic Valley, which has been and is still today a crossroads of multiple Native nations and a place of cultural exchange. I'd also like to acknowledge our neighboring indigenous nations, the Nipmuc and Wampanoag to the east, the Mohegan and the Pequot to the south, the Mohican to the west, and the Abenaki to the north. It's important to note that these are not merely historical relationships. They are enduring connections between the contemporary indigenous people and the place where Amherst sits. Convocation celebrates the start of the academic year and the launch of the college career of our new students. We come together today to formally mark the start of our time together as a community dedicated to intellectual growth and fellowship. As we entered this space just now, the class of 2027 and our other incoming students stood while our faculty members processed through them in regalia. Students, you stood as a sign of respect for these people who will be your teachers. At your commencement, your graduation, we will reverse this. Our faculty will stand to honor you as you process in your commencement robes in symbolic recognition of the journey you have been on together and your readiness to launch into the world as Amherst graduates. It has been our custom at Amherst to award an honorary Master's of Arts degree to faculty members who have reached the rank of full professor and who are not themselves graduates of the college. This custom derives in part from a desire to pay tribute to their distinction as teachers and scholars. More important still, the tradition shows Amherst's pride in them. And we hope in this way to bring them even more closely into the long life of Amherst College. Before we bestow these honorary degrees, I'd like to also acknowledge Professor Daryl Harper, class of 1990 from the Department of Music, who unfortunately could not be here tonight with us. Daryl is a distinguished graduate of the college who became a full professor in 2022. Custom prevents us from awarding an additional Amherst degree this evening, but not from expressing our exceptional pride in Daryl's accomplishments through our applause. Please join me in welcoming Daryl Harper. Will the degree recipients please approach the stage? Professor Michael Ching, Mathematics and Statistics. Professor Robert Hayashi, American Studies. Professor Katrina Karkazis, Sexuality, Women's, and Gender Studies. Professor Michael Konichika, Russian. Professor Ingrid Nelson, English. And Professor Jason Robinson, music. By the virtue of the authority vested in me by the Board of Trustees of Amherst College, I confer upon you the degree of Master of Arts, honoris causa, with all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. Please join me in congratulating me. I'm now pleased to introduce the Amherst College Glee Club, led by Gilbert Wermeling, Director of the Choral Program and Visiting Lecturer in Music, which will be performing 3 gifts with words and music by Lisa Smith van der Linden, a member of the class of 1989. Incoming students, over the last week, You've been oriented to this campus and this community in so many ways. And I'm sure that many of you were wondering tonight as you headed over here for your fourth or fifth time, why you're being brought into this chapel one more time to sit together as a full class and listen to me, your president. I started my own career at Amherst here 35 years ago, and I still find this chapel where we gather for moments of ritual to be a strange place, with its hard seats and straight rows, its high polished white everywhere. If you look behind you and to the sides, most of the paintings on the wall, most but not all, are of former Amherst presidents. And I sometimes wonder if any of them ever felt comfortable up here, or if they all felt as unnerved by standing up at this pulpit as I do. If I feel like a bit of an imposter up here, a bit of a fraud, I'm guessing that some of you feel the same way sitting in your seats. Or maybe you don't feel that today. Maybe you felt it when you first realized how far you are, figuratively, literally, from home. Or maybe it will hit you the first time you're sitting in a seminar and everyone in the class seems to be using some word, hegemony, neoliberalism, construct, in a way that you've never heard before. At our last commencement at Amherst in May, our student speaker, Quentin J. Retnam, talked about this very dynamic. Quentin arrived at Amherst after having performed military service in his native Singapore. And in his address, he spoke about how often he questioned how he had navigated the long journey from getting up at 5 a.m. for boot camp on a jungle island to oversleeping on the first-year quad and spending time sitting up late in Val. He arrived at an insight after his 4 years at Amherst that I want to share with you as you begin your own journey. These are Quentin's words. Truth be told, we're all outsiders. We've all navigated in-groups and out-groups and just plain being alone, staring at the snowy expanse of the frigid and unforgiving New England winter. That's the funny thing about Amherst. It has a way of welcoming outsiders, of offering us chances to learn and grow, to discover the world and ourselves. A bubble, perhaps, but one that protects and nurtures, a home, if only briefly. But it took Quentin 4 years to understand this. It didn't happen all at once for him or for any of us. It unfolds over time, and it isn't always easy for any of us. One reason you might feel anxiety about this question of belonging is that you've come to this place, this Amherst, at a moment when there is immense scrutiny and pressure on how students are admitted to college. This last summer, a no less august body than the United States Supreme Court weighed in on what factors a college can and cannot consider when admitting a student. That decision from the court elicited widespread, intense reaction, including arguments about what other factors should be considered. It's impossible to go a day without a national newspaper or a cable channel offering a new hot take on college admissions. At Amherst, we don't shy away from difficult questions. In fact, we filed a brief before the Supreme Court arguing that considering race in the admissions process is essential to our vision of educating students in a diverse community. That a racially diverse student body is essential to preparing our students to participate and shape the racially diverse democracies of the world. That was our argument before the court, and we lost. But that loss in court doesn't change our belief that the variety of experiences that you all bring to this campus play a critical role in what you learn and in how we teach. Diversity, whether racial diversity or diversity of other kinds, is not just about numbers of students from this group or that group, but about the way that all of us as a community, learn and live with and from one another every day. I was thinking about how much each of you bring to the campus when over the summer I sat down and I read your application essays. The essays that you wrote as part of the process of earning your place in this incoming class. Your application essays are remarkable documents, and reading them all together is a little bit like reading a very postmodern, quirky novel. Strange, slightly repetitive, sometimes moving, sometimes funny, but always interesting. The essay that stopped me in my tracks, though, was about the anxiety that the writer felt about the essay itself. Here's how that essay begins. This is from one of you sitting out there. For months, I felt paralyzed by what to write within my college application essay. I've worked so hard for so long, and I've been living with the fear that a subpar, unremarkable essay will be what stops my future from being what I've dreamed it to be. I've labored tirelessly for as long as I can remember, fighting for the best grades, the best activities, and most importantly, equal opportunities for myself despite everything going against me. What I admire about this essay is that it names something that I think every one of you has felt in some way or another at least once. That your future depends on your not only working hard, on your not only working well, but on your being perfect. That your one mistake, or even just one subpar, unremarkable essay away from experiencing some kind of failure. When you feel that kind of pressure intensely, it can be tough to cope with, and it can feel impossible to turn off. The good news, the great news, is that this college, this Amherst, can offer you the most remarkable resource for not only coping with that pressure, but maybe even letting go of it. And that resource is the people who surround you here in this chapel and on this campus. Your faculty here today in their resplendent robes, the remarkable staff, and also your fellow students. If you can learn to be vulnerable, to trust, and to listen to one another, you will realize that in this chapel, there are hundreds of stories of resilience, of challenges, of mistakes and victories. You will learn that actually you do not need to be perfect to be successful. And in fact, striving for perfection in everything will limit your creativity and your growth. I hope for all of you that college is a time where you can learn that mistakes can be our best teachers. And during your time at Amherst, I can assure you that you will write subpar essays. I surely did. And your professors, like mine, will let you know. In fact, they're still letting me know. And on the other side of that experience will not be failure, not be shame, but something else. Learning. Reading all of your essays together is a pretty heady experience. You are so much more than any numbers could reveal. Some of you wrote about your families, including losses that you've suffered at too early an age. Others wrote about their hobbies. We have fly fishers and crochet masters in this class. We have a candle collector and at least one aerial artist and another aquarium enthusiast. We have political activists and entrepreneurs. You wrote about the books that you love, the languages that you speak and read. You wrote about Spanish, Russian, ancient Greek, the indigenous language of Mohegan, which is a language indigenous to this region. And you also wrote about the ways that the COVID pandemic disrupted your lives. And a lot of you wrote about music. You described the songs that give you solace in times of difficulty or that helped you to bridge the gap between you and your parents. You wrote about jazz, about opera, about hip-hop, about symphonies, about everything from Beethoven to Bad Bunny and everything that's in between. You wrote about making music, about learning instruments, or how to control your breath for chorus, about mastering the technology to create music electronically. There were 2 very different essays just about drumming, and a shocking but pleasant number of references to 80s rock. So I've been asking myself, why does music matter so much to this class? Here's how one of your classmates, a songwriter, put it. This is also from one of you. To create music isn't just about putting words to vibrations. It's an extensive therapy of searching within the depths of your ethos and pulling out the ugly skeletons that the majority would rather avoid, while sounding cool, of course. Music connects us. It brings us together. And unless you're going to solo, the act of making music requires collaboration, compromise, partnership. A person's musical taste can be a form of self-fashioning, creating a social identity. Music can define us generationally, not only what we listen to, but how we listen to it. I'm sure that at least a few of you have heard your parents go on and on about how back in their day, they had to hunt in stores for CDs and cassettes and you couldn't just load a playlist on their phone. Of course, the study of music is one of the many ways of understanding the world that you can and should pursue here at Amherst as part of a liberal education. But music also offers an analogy for thinking about education itself. It is at once individual and collective. It requires diligence and rewards mastery. It evolves and changes. In the United States, there's a long tradition of our greatest writers turning to music to explain the cacophony of a democratic society. Walt Whitman was inspired by the barbaric yawp of street opera, Zora Neale Hurston by the blues rhythms of the Florida swamps, Ralph Ellison by the syncopation of jazz. The list goes on. These authors also all knew something else. They knew that music can also challenge us and make us uncomfortable. The student essay that I quoted from a second ago talks about how music can exhume, quote, the ugly skeletons that the majority would rather avoid. Music can carry with it so much pain, and I don't mean just the Taylor Swift breakup song. It can push us lyrically and aesthetically. Maybe you've had the experience of nearly losing a friend because you couldn't believe that person would like that song or that artist. Or maybe you've been adventurous and you wandered into a concert hall or queued up a playlist, started listening, and asked yourself, is that even really music? Music can ask us to confront difficult truths of the world, even our history. One of my intellectual heroes, W.E.B. Du Bois, organized his most famous book, The Souls of Black Folk, around quotations from spirituals, because he felt that the music of black people in the United States carried with it an entire history of oppression and resistance more powerful than any prose. A liberal arts education should do all of these things. It should allow you self-expression and a medium of connection. And it should also unearth difficult truths from the past. It should present to you unfamiliar and unnerving perspectives on the future. It will require you, like all great music, to listen. And as with music, there are going to be times when you will hear things that you simply don't like. We learn together as a community here at Amherst, and we believe strongly that learning is richer, deeper, more effective because of that community. A community of learning requires respect, it requires empathy, it requires curiosity about one another. We talk a lot in the United States about the freedom of speech, about our right to express ourselves. To be clear, that freedom is essential to Amherst and to liberal education. Here, we believe strongly in both the right to free expression and in the academic freedom of faculty and students to pursue the truth. What gets less attention, though, is the responsibility that comes with those freedoms. the obligation that we have to listen to one another with generosity and compassion. That does not mean we will always be in harmony with one another, or that we will even always agree on what song we're singing. Education should and will expose you to ideas that make you uncomfortable, that are difficult and troubling. I say this at a moment when in the United States, books are being removed from library shelves and curricula, when authors and intellectuals who write about difficult subjects are being shunned because they create discomfort. As Toni Morrison once put it, quote, "Fear of unmonitored writing is justified because truth is trouble." Truth is trouble. And seeking truth, even seeking to discern what truth means as a category, as Morrison showed in brilliant novel after brilliant novel, is messy, circuitous, even dangerous. It means facing a lot of ugly skeletons, or to return to the metaphor of music, it means listening carefully to songs, instruments, voices, even when you don't recognize the tune. Emily Dickinson, whom we were talking about here just yesterday, also knew that truth is trouble. That's one reason she had to tell it slant. She writes, quote, "The truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind." Truth is trouble. When I say that you will encounter uncomfortable ideas here at Amherst, some of you might think I'm giving you license to say hateful or harmful things to one another, and that is not at all the case. The foundation of a community of learning is not an unfettered right to harm one another. The foundation of a community of learning is a responsibility to seek the truth and knowledge, to be ready to make mistakes as you do so, and just as importantly, to listen to one another. Living in a community means recognizing that we must be accountable to one another. Because truth is trouble, we cannot be a community of learning if we are afraid to speak, if we're so terrified of making mistakes that we're silent. And because truth is trouble, we need to acknowledge when we do say things that cause harm, because one troubling truth is that history shows that those harms are unequally distributed across any community, including ours. Truth is trouble, and to borrow a phrase from John Lewis, it can be and should be good trouble. If we are going to pursue truth in all its messiness, you will need to speak up, to ask questions and share your thinking on difficult matters, even and maybe especially when you're not sure of the right answer. You'll need to say not just what you think others want to hear, but also what you believe advances us toward truth and knowledge, even when it's troubling. If we're going to pursue truth in all its messiness, you will also hear things that are, as Toni Morrison suggests, troubling, disagreeable, distasteful, even discomforting. If we are all in agreement all the time, then we are not really the community of learning that we aspire to be. It can be a hard thing to be a place where we respect and listen to one another, and where we're also prepared to disagree with one another, and to continue to treat each other with respect even when we do. It can be a hard thing, but it can also be a joy. Joy. Think about how many times you have heard a song or a piece of music that seems strange or distant on first listening, but then you listen to it again, maybe a few times, really listened, and you found something new for yourself, something that expanded your horizons, something that made your world just a little bit bigger, a new melody for you to mull over in your head. We are a small college, but in this single chapel, there are so many voices, and we can take pleasure in forming our purpose by listening to all of them, even those that are at times hard to hear. If you do that, if you will take the time to listen to one another, this small place can do for you what it did for me. It can make your world larger, richer, and even more full of joy it can bring to you the best kind of trouble. Here in this place, this Amherst, we learn to live in a community with people who have had very different experiences, who hold very different beliefs from our own. The kinds of communities that are at the heart of a thriving democracy. And that, in fact, is what we are educating you for. To live and lead in democratic societies, to be engaged members and even leaders of societies that work through the joyful messiness of being human, that address the challenges of the future in ways that make room for everyone. Democracy is not something that we practice only on Election Day. It's something that we can enact every time we recognize each other as humans with equal potential, and when we listen with care to one another. Democracy is something we practice when we hold each other accountable to those ideals and when we accept responsibility for when we fail to live up to them, and when we acknowledge that hearing troubling, difficult truths is not easy and its burden not always shared equitably. In the passage that I quoted at the very beginning of this talk hours ago from Quentin's commencement address, he talked about how Amherst could become a home. I know that home is a term that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But my home has never been a place where we all agree quickly or easily on anything of consequence. Biographical fact, I'm married to another Amherst College graduate. And so the only thing that is not up for debate in my house is that our children are not allowed to go to Williams. Everything else, though, when two or more Amherst College graduates are gathered, is up for debate. We talk about everything. What will our futures hold? Where will we live? What TV show to watch? Where to go to dinner out? You know, the big internal questions. A home, for me, is a constant site of negotiation. And what makes it a home is not that we sing in harmony or even that we like the same music, but that we all know that we must return to one another even after our most bitter disagreements. And in my home, we're still learning how to do this. And here at Amherst College, in this place, we're also still learning how to do this, even after 200 years. And with you, we will teach each other how to do it better. This matters, this way that we live with each other in a community of learning. It matters because a liberal education, the kind of education that animates Amherst, is not about teaching particular skills or preparation for a particular profession. It is about preparing for you to live a life of purpose in a free society. That is a lofty mission. And most of you right now, you just want to get on with your evening, make some friends, and see if you can get decent grades in your first semester. And that's okay. But remember this, you are here to learn with and from one another. And the purpose of the diversity of our student body, of this remarkable class of 2027, of our transfer students, is not just to make us feel good about ourselves. We have brought you here, all of you, each of you, because we recognize in you the capacity to learn and the capacity to teach. Here in this room, we have people from around the world and from this very town. We have people who have come from every kind of home and who believe radically different things about religion, about politics, about science, about money. Listen to one another. Hear the different songs that you sing. Be curious, generous listeners. Join the chorus. Sing loudly and with passion. If you can do all that, when you cross the stage at commencement 4 years from now, you too will call this place, this Amherst, your home. Thank you, and have a wonderful academic year. To conclude this evening's program, the Glee Club will lead us, all of us, in singing the hymn to Amherst. You will find the words in your program. Oh, easy, easy. After we sing the hymn together, students, please remain in place while faculty members recess out of the chapel. As you exit the chapel, I hope you will all join me for fellowship and conversation on the specially illuminated quad, where a small surprise gift for the class of 2027 from an anonymous donor awaits, initiating what we hope will be an annual tradition. And now I ask that you all please rise, and as you are able and with feeling, to sing. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.